Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our subject today is the emotional aspects of overeating. Most people who are overweight or obese, and that's most Americans, know they need to eat less than they do to thin down. But still, after dieting and getting a few pounds off, they tend to go back to the same patterns and eat too much. Why is it so hard to eat properly? And what are the emotional pulls to overeating? With us today to talk about this is Dr. Anna Flach. Dr. Flach began her career as a special education teacher in Germany, then came to America and continued that career. Then she got a PhD at the University of Wisconsin and became a clinical psychologist. Her dissertation on eating disorders was published in the American Psychiatric Journal, and she's been treating people with eating disorders for 30 years. Thanks for joining us, Doctor.
I'm glad to be here.
Do you believe that food sometimes is a drug, or is that a lot of hooey, that people say they're addicted to food?
No, I do think food can serve as a drug in terms of self-soothing mechanisms. I don't think it's true that you need more and more and more, but it can become more and more and more in our attempts to soothe ourselves and then feeling very guilty about eating, and then going back to some diet or restricting, which sets the whole circle in motion again, and then the overeating. Yes.
How does that set the cycle again to overeating?
Well, as long as you restrict, if you restrict heavily, or if you go on some crazy grapefruit diet, eventually you will have breakthrough eating.
I see, where you just feel a compulsion to eat.
Yes, when you feel a compulsion to eat. And, you can lose weight, but you should do it gradually and in a balanced way, and increase your exercise.
Okay. The rewards of eating, besides it's fun to eat a cookie, what are the other rewards emotionally, physically, from eating a lot of stuff?
Well, it does change brain chemicals.
Oh.
Yeah. Serotonin, and maybe works on dopamine, and which gives us a high, which gives some people a high. So for the moment, we are really satisfied.
Okay.
And food and love are connected,
How's that?
Well, when we grow up, our mothers, feed us and love us. And when we feel particularly lonely and don't feel the love as adults, we might gravitate unconsciously towards food to establish that reconnection.
Oh, so a lot of people are using food as a substitute in a way for relationships.
Yes, that could be one of those things.
You're from Germany.
Yes.
And I wondered how much of this food, turning to food for comfort and for fun and for this and that, is an American issue versus a worldwide issue.
I think in the Western cultures where food is plentiful, it is an issue. But I see it as a particularly severe issue in America. You just have to walk around and see how many people are overweight and or obese, and it is a really great suffering for people.
How is it different in Europe? What's different that they do or learn?
In Europe, I don't think we have as much processed food. We don't get bombarded with all the food ads. We take more time to sit down, socialize, and have a meal. And that tends to be a balanced meal that doesn't get your blood sugar way up, doesn't spike it way up, and then it comes down, and then you have to eat again.
What kind of food spikes it up?
Sugar.
Oh, so if you go have dinner with people and have dessert, that'll spike it up, or processed?
Well, maybe. But if you grab just candy bars, and you do it a lot, and you don't have time to eat a dinner, you might eat 5 candy bars. And that is not a good way of maintaining a healthy weight. However, there's nothing wrong with eating a candy bar.
No, really?
No, yes. I don't ever want to give the impression that there's any food that's forbidden food. If you want to indulge in something, indulge in moderation.
Okay.
Because I think it's the sometimes I say to my patients, it's the guilt, not the calories, that will put on the weight.
But if you have some chocolate chip cookies in front of you, they
Yeah.
taste good. Why would guilt have to do with the joy of eating sweet?
Well, for some people, if they eat 1 or 2 cookies, they might not feel guilty. But some people who've already bought into the mentality that there's good food and bad food, they will feel guilty even after 1 cookie. And the guilt will probably make you eat the whole box.
Oh, I see. You're bad. You've done this. You might as well just keep going.
Exactly.
Ah.
Rather, you indulged and it felt really good. And I had a brat yesterday at the terrace and still thinking about how well it tasted. And if you eat without guilt and you eat in moderation, you are having a much easier time maintaining a good weight.
So if we look at the healthy mindset versus the mindset that gets to food as a drug we soothe ourselves with, what does the healthy mindset toward food look? How does it look different?
The healthy mindset sees food as something that is to be enjoyed
Oh.
and shared with friends and can make it an art. The unhealthy mindset sees food as something that needs to be grabbed and really shouldn't be eaten. For
food.
some dieters,
Yes.
they're afraid of all kind of foods and feeling guilty after all kind of foods.
And how much of that mindset is American versus worldwide again? I mean, you had mentioned to me something about Germany and France in comparison to the U.S.
Yes. I'm not saying that Germany and France don't have problems with overweight people, but much, much less. I mean, you can just see it when you walk on the streets. The French make a big to-do about food. They live to eat, and yet you see very few people who are overweight.
How does that fit together? It seems like it should be just the opposite.
Well, they don't eat in masses. They
Oh.
just eat. They make their food very satisfying and very fulfilling, and they spend all evening doing it. And,
How can you not get fat if you sit there and eat all night?
well, you socialize. You don't just shove it down. You savor every bite. Yeah,
So savoring has a lot to do with
savoring your food.
this versus
and not-
mindless eating.
Yes, versus mindless eating.
You also told me earlier that when you grew up in Germany, people would go to a movie and not eat popcorn.
Yeah.
How can you do that?
It was the strangest thing to me that you would go to a movie and have popcorn. You either watch the movie or you eat the popcorn. I couldn't grasp why you would do both.
Well, this is interesting because that might kind of be a microcosm of this whole issue.
Yeah.
Eating while you're doing something else, eating while you're distracted. And
Right.
In Germany and France, you're saying you're focusing when you're eating, you're eating.
Yeah. You're focusing on your food and the taste of it and on the friends you're with.
Do you think faster eating also might be related?
Definitely. Shoveling your food in is a bad sign.
Yeah. But is there some kind of drug when you eat fast versus savoring your food that might, if you have some emotional problems, be medicating you?
Yes, it might be medicating for the moment.
For the moment. You feel
Yeah.
bad for the moment. And then worse later.
And burst later, and then sort of feeling like, oh, I've blown it, so I might just eat anything inside.
Yeah.
That's a very common phenomenon that gets people into trouble.
Let's talk about depression. How do you see this relating? I mean, depression is not an uncommon thing, unfortunately, in
Right.
America. If you were depressed in Germany or France, or you're depressed in America, how do you put food in those perspectives of those cultures and drugs?
That's a tough question for me to answer, but I think depression and anxiety in Europe people don't necessarily turn to the quick fix of shoveling something into your body just to feel momentarily good. That it's a foreign attitude in Europe. It would never occur to me to just shovel something into my body in order to feel good. I might want to savor it.
How did that become so Americanized then?
Because our life is faster, quicker, we have so many advertisements, we don't take time. And we are such a productive society in America that many of us, if we really examine our attitude towards food, think food is really some sort of thing that is not necessary, not productive, and should get over with. And we should get over with.
There's a lot of contradictions here, because you're saying in Europe they value food, they love it, we kind of dismiss it, but yet we're hooked on it.
Yeah, because we feel guilty about eating, and we don't ever sort of attempt to reach satiety.
So the contradiction is savor it, and you will be less likely to eat compulsively or use food as a drug versus a pleasure.
Versus a pleasure without guilt. But that doesn't mean, just telling someone that will automatically turn them from a slightly obese person to a normal weight person. There's much more intervention that goes into it.
What type of person is most vulnerable to this kind of food addiction, or food addiction light? Is it men or women, young or old?
I definitely think it's more women, because there's so much emphasis placed on women being slender. And the more you try, the harder it gets, as opposed to accepting some sort of normal weight. And that can be fashionable. I'm not saying that I don't manage my weight. But I think we have unrealistic pictures of how slender a woman needs to be.
So if we're going to make a program of helping people change, so they don't turn to food to self-soothing, what would you suggest?
Well, to treat the underlying depression,
or
anxiety, and to find other ways of self-soothing.
How about boredom? How do you treat that?
Oh, boredom is a very, very bad trigger for overeating and for any other kind of things. Yes.
For drugs. So how do you treat boredom?
Well, the more interest you have, the less you get bored. Or starting a bit of an exercise program.
As another interest, so you don't get bored?
Yeah. And but another reason is also that it releases endorphins, and it makes us feel better, and it reduces some of the guilt of overeating or of eating.
Exercise does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exercise. Yeah.
But it also, when you overeat, you get endorphins too, right? Or some kind of chemical reaction.
Yeah. But if
so you can either exercise or binge or eat. I don't even binge in the sense you have an eating disorder, but overeat to get.
Yeah, but if you exercise, you feel good about yourself later on.
Yes.
If you binge, you might feel good for the moment, and then the guilt comes, and then the restrictive part comes.
This boredom thing intrigues me. I mean, I could see, like, all of a sudden you're supposed to have an appointment, it was canceled, you got about 45 minutes and nothing to do. You're near a Starbucks and you go in to get some treat. What do you say to people about changing that? How do you talk to their psyche about getting out of the mindset of using food as a filler when you're bored?
Yeah, well, I would say, but my mother used to say, you will ruin your lunch or dinner if you eat right now. It won't taste as good anymore. Go to Starbucks and have your coffee. And nowadays everybody plays with their iPad. And so that's a way of killing boredom.
Yeah.
And the idea of you won't be that satisfied with your lunch if you fill yourself up right now.
Okay.
It's what mothers have said all along.
The issue of boredom might be a subject for a whole program.
Yes.
How do you deal with boredom?
Mm-hmm.
And I know you weren't prepared to talk about this today.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything that comes to mind when you think of people you know, clients you've known, who are just bored all the time? What's going on?
I hate to admit that I don't have that many people who are bored all the time, because I work with a population that's highly ambitious, and they're terribly overscheduled.
These are eating disorder clients.
Yeah. So I know people who might be bored a lot, who don't have many interests, and they're probably in the less educated class, or they don't have enough social connections, or they don't, or they're very shy and aren't able to take the initiative to belong to a group or join a frisbee team or go ballroom dancing.
Yes.
But I personally, in my practice, I don't encounter it very much.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is if you can somehow increase your interests and your connections and exercise, then you're likely to be less susceptible to this eating as a drug.
Definitely. And also, don't forget, it gives, when people exercise, it gives them permission to eat their lunch, as opposed to, okay, I have to eat my lunch, I'm bored. It gives them permission, it reduces the guilt, overeating.
And what does that then do for them if they feel, I've earned my lunch? Isn't that also doing the same kind of thing you were worried about, where you have to justify eating? You have to...
Yes, I'm worried about people having to justify eating, but if you're already in the throes of food is bad, food is your enemy, and you shouldn't be eating, then to have a justification for eating may be a step forward.
I see.
Then they can eat without guilt.
Well, you thoroughly confused this, because you've turned everything on its head, because you're saying loving food is a way out of loving food. So with that thought, provocative as is, maybe we'll close, and I thank you very much for joining us, Anna Flach, and I hope you join us on the next edition of Insights.